Good to be here. I like Essex. Very quiet response to that. Oh, sorry, you're up in the grade because I said I only like Essex. You said I love Essex. All right, cool. It's funny that you should say it's the first. So I've been noticing God speaking to me in slightly odd ways just lately. Odd sounds bad, doesn't it? Different. So about however long ago, September the 15th. I know exactly what day it was because that's part of the story. So the first trip, because like loads of people, our year got, the calendar got erased basically. So our first trip of any description to minister was September the 15th. And we went to Portsmouth. So, church down there. And they sent us where it was going to be, and they said, park your car outside the car valet place, and we're going to have your car valeted for you. That's never happened to me before on a trip. I thought it was very nice. You don't need to do that next time. It's okay. So anyway, we parked our car and did the day's ministry, socially distanced, did a bit of coaching for the team and stuff like that. And then, jumped in the car, which is immaculately cleaned on the inside and the outside. And was driving home, and I said, so, if I was prophetic, which she then told me often to say, don't put yourself down, which she's quite good at doing. I said, well, if I was prophetic, I'd say, look, ministry, a car in a dream means ministry. So I figure that having our car cleaned on the inside and the outside, and that this is the first trip, this is a new day of our ministry. That's my conclusion. And then I said, oh, you know what today's date is? And Sue said, no, go on. I said, well, it's the 15th of September, which is the 19th anniversary of us jumping on a plane 4 days after 9/11 to go to Redding, California, which was the beginning of a completely new season in our life. And it's like, I think it's a new day. And actually felt like a new day ever since. And then actually, strangely, today it ended up being, and it doesn't matter the details, but I'm working with a team, and the team's been a bit beaten up. We've had some pretty serious challenges, and we regrouped most of the team in the last 24 hours, and then the leader of it I was texting him this morning, and I just looked down at my Bible, and it's the 28th of October today, and I don't operate in dates very often, but I'm just like, it's the 28th of October. I wonder what Acts 28 verse 10 says. I mean, call me strange if you like. It said, and we set sailed and we had everything we need. I texted the team and I go, it's all right. We're setting sail. We relaunched today. Let's get this show on the road. So God's been kind of speaking in some strange, unusual and encouraging ways to me. In fact, the other day, Sue was walking up to bed and she said, it's 22:22. What's that mean? I said, that's easy. It's Isaiah 22:22. He's placed the key of the house of David on his shoulder, and he opened a door that no man will shut, and shut a door that no one will open. Apart from anything else, my wife was impressed that I immediately knew a verse. But we were both encouraged because it's like, that'll do. We'll take that. And I know it's weird, those numbers, but I've seen 22:22 frequently just lately. Anyway, I was foolish enough to publish a book during a pandemic, which is kind of fun. They're on Amazon, Kindle, Bethel, or if you want, you can write to me via Rob and we'll mail one to you if anybody wants it. It's called Things Fathers Do. It was birthed out of me going to Brazil with my youngest son Luke for the Soccer World Cup, Football World Cup of 2014. Officially, I was there to speak at a conference, but it happened to coincide with the World Cup. It's very kind of them to organise that. The trip was amazing. England were terrible. But on the plane on the way home, I had preaching in the morning, and I wrote a preach on the plane, and I wrote down 32 things that fathers do, because I'd just been on a trip of a lifetime with my youngest son, and that was what birthed it. And so this is the result of that. There is a chapter in there for ladies, and there's about to be a children's version, which was going to be called Things Daddies Do, But then somebody said, you have to spell it Daddies, which is grammatically correct. And I looked at it and I thought, that looks terrible. That is the worst word in the English language. Daddies just looks wrong. So we changed it to Things My Daddy Does, which got me out of that. So there's a children's book coming out on Father's Day next year, all being well. And somebody found me the most amazing illustrator. She's my Quentin Blake. If you know Roald Dahl, she's as good. And I'm not exaggerating, she's as good. So, but anyway, I'm going to throw that at you just because I like you. But if anybody wants one, jump on Amazon, or if you want to ask Rob, and I'll get some to here and he can give them out or whatever. But we're going to do some Q&A. We'll do some Q&A for a little while. And then if anyone asks a really good question and it ends up being a preach, I'll run with it. But if not, I've got a really good preach. I never used to say I had a really good preach, but I got over that putting myself down thing. Anyway, anyone got any questions about life, transforming Essex, Jesus, big green eggs? Has COVID been good or bad for the church? I mean, I guess the reality is I don't fully know, because I don't know every church. My belief is that it is a great invitation to the church. The question is, will the church accept the invitation? So I'm pretty sure the last time I was here, I preached on Zechariah chapter 4. If I didn't, I apologize. Did I? That we're a generation that can go where we like, do what we like, say what we like, believe what we like. Does anyone remember that? And so I believe that we are a generation where secularism has said we can do what we like. Globalization, extreme globalization, has said we can go where we like. Social media says I can say what I like, and fake news says that I can believe what I like. So I preached that before the pandemic. I believe that the Lord said to me, read Zechariah chapter 4. He told me on July the 29th last year, read Zechariah chapter 4, and I'll give you the keys to a generation. So I was preaching on that before this came around. And here's the nutshell, and I think this is the answer is, the invitation is, will we restore the foundations and hold the plumb line of principles in our hands? That, I believe, is the invitation. And Zechariah chapter 4, well, Zechariah chapter 3 says Jesus is on his way. The branch is coming, which is Jesus. And Jesus is the answer. We all know Jesus is the answer. The question is, what does it look like? And so Zechariah chapter 4 has some incredible verses. Number one amazing verse is, not by might, not by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord. Zechariah 4 verse 1 is a wake-up call, and I believe there's an invitation to the church to wake up to the fragile nature of mankind without God, and to wake up to the power that is Jesus Christ. So I believe that Zechariah chapter 4 has an invitation. It tells us that it's not by might, not by power, but by my spirit. It says, do not despise the day of small beginnings. Then says, the foundation has been laid, and that's where I believe the invitation is. Will the church blow the dust off the foundation and recognize and return to our foundations? Because our desire to pursue kind of being comfortable in the world, embracing secularism, embracing hyper grace, embracing universalism, embracing some elements of deconstruction of the church. We've been playing around with that stuff. And if you build with foundations, need two things. If you want to put an extension on your house, you need two things. You're going to put a foundation down, and you need permission. And the church has been building without foundations, without permission. And we have built an unstable church because we've been building without a stable foundation and without permission. So I believe that the invitation is, will you build on the foundation that's been laid? And then will you build with principles? And I'm almost certain I would have outlined them, but I believe the foundations are these four things: who God says he is, who he says we are, what he has said and done, and what he has said he will do. I believe those are the clear foundations of what we build on, and that the principles are the principle of truth, which is the Word of God. We need to get back to the Word of God and study it and not be afraid of truth. We need relationship. We need restoration of relationships as being one of our primary things that we pursue. That we need to align with the assignment of heaven, which is to bring heaven to earth, to bring change and transformation, and we need to do all things with power. So in a nutshell, that's what I preached last time, but I believe it's the same answer because it's an invitation. And if you look at, I'll guarantee you everyone in this room has quoted a verse that was written into or out of captivity. In other words, this book, you cannot understand this book without what we are experiencing in our modern day version. In other words, this book is about things that happened in captivity, in exile, in prison, in wanderings and waitings. So if we're thinking to ourselves, oh, this is terrible, no, we are privileged. We have got to experience something of biblically epic proportions. And so to me, it's that. So, what's the verse that loads of people quote about purpose? Jeremiah 29:11. It was written by Jeremiah to the Jews in captivity in Babylon. He has a purpose for us, says the Lord, plans to bring us a hope and a future. So to me, we've been given a great opportunity, and we're in it right now. It's why for me, Transforming Essex, this afternoon, we started talking about, okay, let's forget the previous plans and adapt the plans for a post-pandemic Essex. Why not be in front? Why can't the church be in front? Why do we have to be behind? Why do we have to wait for, the sociologists and the psychologists and the economists and everyone else to tell us how we get out of this? Why can't we get out in front? So to me, it's an invitation. Got me preaching there. Nearly. Anyone else? What's the effect of the pandemic on people would be the first question. And then, what is a kingdom answer to that issue? So what are people experiencing? The loss of relationship, for instance, how much are we stopping and thinking, what's actually going on with our not being able to hug people and et cetera, et cetera? What's the actual effect on us as human beings? And therefore, in what way could we focus on that need and help to serve that need in the church would be one of the ways. So this is my thinking, and I'm not whatever I would need to be an expert in what I'm about to say. But this is my experience. A couple of people say come to my house that are friends of mine. I don't shake their hand. I don't hug them. I don't go closer to them than 6 feet. I kind of escort them out into the garden. They sit at a table. I cook them some nice food. I tell them they can use the bathroom, which we've nicely sanitized because, our guests are now dirty people that we have to, protect ourselves from. I have a conversation with them, and then when they go, I don't hug them. I don't shake their hand or anything like that. I think what's actually happening to me is that my brain and my body are competing with each other because my body hasn't confirmed that I'm connected to these people. So I think there's this emotional draining thing that's going on because it's almost like I'm second-guessing myself. Did I say anything to offend them? Because normally if somebody left my house and I didn't hug them, shake their hand, it would be because in some way I had distanced myself or offended them. So I think my brain's second-guessing. Did I offend them? Did I do something wrong? Did I say something wrong? So I think what we've got is a lot of people who have varying degrees of disconnection from relationships. We should be the best in the world at helping people with the restoration of relationships. So I think maybe one of the last things that we need to do is reopen our churches and have nice, tidy meetings. I think we need to have some right messy meetings and put meal tables in the middle of the place. And maybe we might sing a couple of songs and maybe we might share a couple of verses. But actually what we need is each other. So I think it would be that sort of thing. Emotional health, mental illness, mental health. What are actually the effects of that? And can we step in and be something of an answer? Can we, in the area of, say, businesses or organizations or other churches, what are the needs that they have, and can we help? Could we even help people to start up businesses, that sort of thing? So I think there's probably a list of things like that we could jump into and actually try and be the solution to problems. Personally, I think for too long, let me give you one example. The last 50 years has seen the rise of change management experts in our world. Anyone who's in business or large organizations, you've probably paid thousands of pounds to have a change management expert, strategic management consultant come to your business. We've been left behind on that, the church, but our job description is changed. The last time I checked my Christian job description, I joined this club, if I can call Christianity a club, forgive me, but it works for this illustration. My entry to this club was that I was changed. I gave my life to Jesus. I was changed, yeah? My assignment is to bring change, to see other people's lives change. And my prayer is, make earth like heaven. My whole assignment is change. I joined out of change. My assignment is change. I'm to bring change. I'm to pursue change. So shouldn't we be the leaders in change? So here we are. This is my observation, is that here we are at this moment in history. This is a huge moment in history. I think a lot of us have been kind of thinking, oh, it's not too bad. It'll pass. Well, we had the first phase, which was survival. Now we're getting the sort of the temporary normality that we're learning to live with, and we're not quite sure when we're exiting this. I think this is a paradigm shift. I think this is one of the big paradigm shifts, not so much the pandemic, but actually some of the way that we do life on earth. Well, there have been 3 major paradigm shifts up until what I'm going to call this one, which I think is more around the digital age. The first was when we discovered the earth was round and not flat. You all know the earth's round, don't you? You okay with that? Any Flat Earth Society members here? So we discovered the earth is round and not flat, which I believe in the heart of God, the purpose was the gospel of Jesus Christ, because it enabled the gospel to be sent around the world. Is everyone okay with that? Second paradigm shift is the printing press, which put the Bible in the hands of every believer. Therefore, the purpose of the printing press, ultimately, in the heart of God, must have been that he wanted everyone to have access to the Word of God and be able to read it. Third paradigm shift was electricity, the discovery of electricity, which enabled the communication of the gospel through radio and TV and film, etc., etc. The purpose, surely, the gospel. I think the fourth paradigm shift is a digital age, which was meant for that. And anybody who was observing, somewhere around March the 22nd of this year, the internet in this country crashed because there were so many churches on a Sunday morning using Zoom and the internet. I have a feeling that the digital age came of age in terms of the gospel. That my point is, we shouldn't be surprised by change. I think that change is in the heart of God. Christians, though, have had this mindset that God's an old guy who sits on a cloud, on a throne, and talks to Moses about Moses-type stuff, and that God would be surprised if you gave him an iPad and he wouldn't know what to do with it. I have news for you. God can do things with an iPad that Steve Jobs didn't know could be done. Because that's our God. Does this make any sense at all? So to me, it's like, he's not surprised, so why should we be surprised? I could carry on, but... Any other questions before I may or may not preach on what I was going to preach? I personally believe that God is... So here's a little bit of my personal journey. I first studied strategic planning in 1991 in Feltham Young Offenders Institution. When Feltham had had 4 deaths in custody in 20 months, I was headhunted from Belmarsh, not far from here, I guess, and was working there, was headhunted and sent to Feltham to be part of the solution. And we brought in a management consultant to try and solve the problem. So it was my first entry into strategic planning, and I discovered that I loved it. And I became the change manager for Feltham, and I led about 152 teams of prison officers through 3-day workshops developing a healthier strategy. Sadly, Feltham is still a troubled young offender institution, but I'm not responsible for it anymore, but maybe I wish I was. But so strategy's been a part of my journey. When Isaiah came out in the Passion Translation, I went straight to Isaiah chapter 9 because it's probably my favorite verse. It's definitely in the Old Testament, but maybe in the Bible. A child is born, a son is given, and the government is on his shoulders. And his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. I opened up Isaiah to that page, and there were 5 phrases, not 4. And the extra phrase was, God is the extraordinary strategist, which excited me quite a lot because strategy isn't in the Bible anywhere other than on a strategic day, John the Baptist's head was presented to Herod. Literally says that. It's like that's the only reference to strategy up until then. So to me, there's something about our God being strategic. But here's the incredible thing. We've now, hopefully this is helpful to you. Hopefully we'll end up encouraged. But we have a whole earth problem right now, don't we? And I mean, definitely in our lifetime, as far as I know, even the world wars weren't totally whole earth problems. They were pretty close. But that was before my time anyway. So we now have a whole earth problem, yeah? Everyone with me on that? But we have a God who has whole earth strategies. So I love transforming Essex, but transforming Essex is only a part of a whole earth strategy. So here's God's 4 greatest strategies. Number 1, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. He has a strategy for the whole world to be saved. Habakkuk 2:14, the whole earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of God. Psalm, I think it's 67, says that thy ways may be known in all the earth. And when Jesus is born, the angels said, peace on the earth. We have a God with a whole earth strategy. He thinks whole earth. I think that's pretty exciting, actually. And so he's a God with a whole earth strategy, and he's a God with a change agenda. We're meant to be changed to be like him. We become new creations. Pretty decent stuff. Can a nation be changed in a day? Change the way you think? So we have a God who understands change, who has a whole earth strategy. So what are we worried about? Get more excited about that. Maybe the mask get in the way. Anyway, any other questions? I think we have a great invitation. We have a great opportunity. He's speaking. He didn't send it, but he'll use it. Without any shadow of a doubt, he will use this moment. And this is an epic moment in history, and we got to be alive for it. And yes, there are effects on it, but we have the answer because we know the one who is the answer. So the question is, will we accept the invitation and will we jump into people's lives? Because I really do believe this is a moment. People are asking questions that they don't normally ask. People are hungry and people are willing. My click and collect Tesco guy on Saturday morning told me he had a bad ear, so I prayed for him. He was hungry for it. He was like, he'd take anything. And I think there's a load of people like that. All right. Let me jump into something slightly different, but it's not totally different. I think. Unless anyone's got any more questions. You really are quiet here in Essex. So here's what I came to share, and I'll stay with it because I'll explain where it came from. About 5 years ago, somebody said to me, just in one of those passing conversations, they said, you should never compromise on your shoes, your chairs, or your beds. I'm like, that's really logical, good advice. I mean, it's just simple, good advice, but I had never heard anybody say it that way. Shoes, chairs, and beds. Why? Because that's the whole of your life. Because you're either standing, sitting, or lying down. Yeah? Unless anyone's got another method of transport. I mean, even in your car, you're sitting down. In your plane, you're sitting down. Or your plane, if you have one. I parked mine just out there. You're either lying, standing, or sitting, yeah, in the natural. So don't compromise on shoes, beds, and chairs. Which, when I think about it, it's like I spent half of my life buying cheap shoes, chairs, and beds. And actually, I have a personal testimony where I was healed by changing my shoes. And I'll tell you quickly the story. So I had a lot of cramps. I had toe cramps, shin cramps. I had kind of sciatica running down both sides of my legs, and I had low back pain. And I'd had it for probably about 8 or 9 months. I knew that it wasn't circulatory, but I didn't know anything else about it. Wasn't sure whether it was a trapped nerve, etc., etc. Then a guy called David Wagner came to Bethel, and I had one of the most awkward prophetic sessions, or it started very awkwardly. He's since become a friend of mine. But he was flying in, and I'd done a favor for Iris Ministries, and so David Wagner was flown in, and he was just going to prophesy over all the people who'd helped out on the project. And I was one of them. And I couldn't get to the church, so I met him in the lobby of a hotel. So literally, it was like a sort of a blind date. It's like, you're meeting the prophet in the hotel lobby that I'd never met before. And we sat down, he gave me a prophetic word. And it was a Tuesday, he gave me the prophetic word, and he said, you're going to see cancer healed in the last days of somebody's life. And which I passionately want to see. It's a great word. The downside of it means you have to be in the last days of people's lives that are dying of cancer, which isn't a whole lot of fun. And I've been a nurse, and I would rather avoid that, but whatever. Anyway, I went home. I had these leg problems, and I was preaching the next day. It was the Leaders' Advance at Bethel, and I was preaching at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I just said to Sue, I've got a prophetic word. I'm going to see cancer healed. I'm going to wear my cowboy boots. Now, when I had prostate cancer, a friend of mine in Texas bought me a pair of $400 cowboy boots and said, these are for crushing cancer. Those same boots, when I was sitting in the front row of Bethel at Christmas, the year that my friend bought them for me, I was on the front row. Bobby Connor came into town, and he looks down at me and he goes, those boots are for crushing cancer, boy. He knew nothing of the story. So I've now got this word about cancer. So I said to my wife, I'm going to wear my boots. Now, I put those boots on at 7 o'clock on that Wednesday morning. I took them off at midnight that night, and I had absolutely no pains whatsoever in my body. I wore those boots pretty much every day. Were you around in those days? I wore them pretty much every day. It was, and then I was going to Australia, and I was going to Australia in the summer, so I'd probably been wearing for about 3 months, and they were wearing out. And I was trying to find somewhere to repair my boots in Reading, which is pretty difficult. And I found one place, and he said, I can do them in 10 days. I said, I need them tomorrow. He said, so I can't do that. I said, well, will $100 help? So I gave him $100. I got my boots the next day. I wore those boots in Australia in the heat. And then eventually a friend of mine stopped me from wearing them and said they didn't really suit a European or a Brit. So I did bring them back with me, but I honestly wouldn't wear them today. But the funny thing was, it converted me to only buying good shoes. All of that to say, I then started thinking about this message, and the message started to be, what are the postures of the Christian life? And so I'm just going to run through them. And the reason why I think that this is appropriate for this season is, there is so much being thrown at us in terms of the news and fake news and stuff. And, what should you believe and all of that. And so it's kind of an action-oriented message. And you don't have to do any more than take one of these that suits you. But I was saying to Lizzie earlier, you got, in the world of marketing, people say you should have a call to action. Anything you do, call to action. So this is call to action preaching. So all I'm going to say to you is, pick one of these and make it yours and take it home with you and do something with it, okay? And I've got, maybe, depends how we're doing, 10, 11, 12 or 13, something like that. But the concept is, if physically you should pay attention to your shoes, your bed, and your chair, what are the postures of the Christian life? So let's have a look at this. Laying. It's a classic. But Psalm 23 verse 2, we lay down in green pastures. Some of you probably need to do that. Some of you probably just need to learn how to lay down in green pastures, which equals life, because the green equals life. So it's about learning to lay down in life. Now, I'm not claiming to be an expert at this, but a friend of mine, Steve Witt, is a pastor in Cleveland, Ohio. And he was in my house in America one day, and I was making him coffee, which is a passion of mine. And I have a good coffee machine. He was in my house and he looked and he says, "That's your soul corner, isn't it?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "That's your soul corner." And he said, "That's your soul thing is the coffee machine." And he said, all of us need to have soul things, soul places, and soul people. And here's what happens is, if they converge, you find a place of rest for your soul. And some of you need to learn how to do that. It's a version of laying down. Obviously, I don't make coffee laying down, but the concept is, do you actually know how to lay down in a place that's refreshing to your soul? And I've come to the conclusion I have at least 3 variations of that. One is definitely making coffee, and I have a very similar coffee machine in my house, at my home. And as far as I'm concerned, every day of my life, I make at least 2 cups of coffee, one for my wife and one for me, and I take time over it, and please don't interrupt me when I'm making coffee. Because that is my soul place, my soul thing, and my soul person. And they overlap, and honestly, I switch off for 5 minutes making coffee, and I put latte art on it and all that sort of stuff. And I dial my coffee in, and I time it, and I weigh it, and I want it good. And it's incredible. It is a miracle in my life that David Chambers is still one of my closest spiritual sons on the earth, because he doesn't even drink my coffee, which is almost criminal. Is that true, David? He's tried it a couple of times, but he'd rather just have a cup of tea. But here's my challenge to you. Do you have that in your life? Do you have that kind of place, thing, people? So I have a couple of other examples. Another one of is based around food. But there is a glory in food. I don't know whether you know that. There is a glory in all food, but maybe in mine, as far as David's concerned. There is. Don't you think there's glory in food? I mean, the fact that somewhere, at some stage, somebody noticed an oval object coming out of the rear end of a chicken, took that object, cracked it open, threw away the yellow part, kept the white part, found some sticks, whisked it, sent over to the Caribbean somewhere and got some sugar cane, mixed it in and cooked it on a slow temperature in an oven and called it a meringue. That is glory. Has to be. So I have a rather extravagant piece of equipment that I bought with my prison service pension payout to treat myself. I have a big green egg, and honestly, I like nothing more than cooking outdoors in the rain in England in the winter at temperatures around about 300 to 400 degrees centigrade, and it's a soul corner for me. It's that. It's a thing. It's what I love to do. It's with people. It's in my home, and I switch off. And I do. I switch off. And the only thing I'm really interested in is whether someone's going to take a photograph of what I cooked so that it can be bragged about on Instagram. Or another one is in lots of different places. But if I put a camera to my eye, and I've carried a camera my entire life, I switch off. I'm resting. So do you have that? Do you know how to lay down in a place of life that refreshes you? And maybe you do, but maybe you haven't associated it. You haven't connected it together. And I can genuinely tell you, 5 minutes on a coffee machine, I am really not thinking about anything else. Is that okay? Philippians, I've got verses for all of these, but let me just run through them like this, otherwise we might be here. But there's also laying stuff down. Is there anything you need to lay down, anything that you need to give up, any sin, striving, distraction, anything like that? Philippians Let me just jump to that. But there's a laying down of stuff. And I think some of us every now and then have to do that. We have to go, more than that, it says in Philippians, I count all things to be lost in view of the surpassing value of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord, for whom I have suffered the loss of all things and count them but rubbish in order that I may gain Christ. Why is that important in this season? Because it feels like we've been forced to lay stuff down, but actually there is a great blessing in us choosing to lay stuff down. Laying down the distractions of our life. I was listening to a John Mark Comer podcast on the way here today called The Rule of Life. And, a very simple one that he was saying was, is your time with God before you pick up your phone? It's very simple, but are you willing to lay down that, let me check everything before I pick up my Bible, or you're going to pick up your Bible first? So is there any stuff in your life you need to lay down? And then there's this one, which again I think is really important, and it's when did you last lay your life down? When did you last lay your life down for Him? I can remember, and many of you know this song, it's a Brian Johnson song, You Can Have It All. And I know the night he wrote it. And I know what happened in the room. The way my mind works. But I remember the people running to the front that night. And I know that night Brian wrote the chorus for that song. You can have it all, every part of my life. And Sue, my wife, commented recently about this. She said, I think that as we come out of this pandemic, we obviously want to see the lost saved. Of course we do. And we want our doors open for as many people as possible. But she said, I think that we are all going to need to do that again. I think we're all going to need to find a way of really laying our lives down as we come out of this pandemic. We've just different things have happened to us, different ways that we've been living our lives, and we need to come back in and, as it were, rededicate our lives and say, you can have it all, and to lay our lives down. I just want to challenge you. Some of you, that might make more sense to than others. So, laying down. A few standing ones. What are you standing on? And the simple one of that is we should be standing on the promises of God. I don't know why that isn't working for me that year, but it doesn't want to bend very well. That's all right. What are you standing on? What promise are you standing on? So many things are being shaken in this season. So what are you standing on? And I just want to challenge you just to check. Do you know what you're standing on? Do you know what promise you're standing on? The key to not having anxiety for the future is what you're standing on today. It's like anxiety is worrying about what you won't have in the future, but gratitude is being grateful for what you have today. And what are you standing on today? Because it's the cure for anxiety. Because if you know what you're standing on today, you won't be drifting off into anxiety about tomorrow. What are you standing on? What promise of God are you standing on? If I was to walk around here now with a microphone in my hand and say, tell me the promise of God you're standing on for your life. What are you standing on? What will you stake everything on? I can tell you what mine is. I can tell you what His is. I can tell you what His is. He might not know what His is, but I think I know what yours is. So what are you standing on? Is that okay? How are we doing? Postures of the Christian life. Laying down, laying stuff down, standing on stuff. What are you standing for? Why is that so important? Because there's so much garbage out there that people are telling me that they're standing for, and I want everyone to check that they're standing for something worth standing for. I know people who are standing for things that honestly, they're losing relationships, they're having arguments because they're standing for something which is of no eternal consequence, and in some cases is actually wrong. But you can't tell them it's wrong. So what are you standing for? There's something you would say if I came around and said, what are you standing for? One of the things that I am standing for is unity. For me, it's one of the biggest things that matters for me, that we have to stand for unity. He's coming back for a united bride. Coming back for a whole bride. So I stand for unity. So there's a consequence to that. It means that there are things that I don't do or say. Because I'm standing for unity. I'm standing for a united bride. But there's so much junk being thrown at us, I think it's useful for us to go, no, I'm standing for that. And nothing is going to move me away from that. I've had people say to me, why didn't you ever preach on eschatology? Well, partly because I don't understand it, but actually the real reason why, not joking, because I'm intelligent enough, I think, to understand it. I don't study eschatology. The reason I don't study it is because if I studied it, I would preach out of it. And if I preach out of it, I would present to you my version of eschatology. And because nobody seems to agree over it, I would cause division wherever I go. And that is counter to what I am standing for. Because I'm standing for a united bride. If I get around a Roman Catholic, I want to know where we agree. I don't care where we disagree. I want to know where we agree. Because I want unity. Is that okay? In fact, one of my favorite moments actually it was 2018. I was preaching a message, and it's in the school that Rob did the school. I do a night on communion, and I got the message out of a moment when I was doing communion, leading communion at Bethel, and I read the verse, "This cup is the new covenant." And as I read it, I could see a Bible in a cup. It's like, to me, my mind's eye, there's a whole Bible. If you come to my house, you'll find a wine glass that has a Bible in it. It's a big wine glass. I don't ever drink out of it. It holds 2 bottles. But it also holds a Bible, which is probably a better use for the wine glass. Okay? The concept is, all of this is in there. We have pathetic little cups, don't we, in our non-conformist churches? And so I was teaching this. All of this is in this cup. Does that make sense to you? I mean, everything in the Old Testament is in the cup. Jesus said, this cup is the new covenant in my blood. Everything, every promise, every truth, it's all in the cup. So I teach that. And I was teaching it on this occasion in Germany, and a Roman Catholic priest came up to me and he said, Paul, I need to tell you something. He said, when I was priested, which I think is the technical term that they use, doesn't really make sense in my English language class, but he said, when I was priested, I was given a chalice. And at the bottom of my chalice in Latin is written the first verse in the Bible. And around the rim at the top is the last verse of the Bible written in Latin. Because when I was given that chalice, I was told, this cup is the new covenant. All of this is in there. And I'm like, you just gave me my best lesson of the year. I want unity. I'm standing for unity. And then what are you standing against? I have got verses for all these. Romans 1:16 was what I was standing for. 2 Corinthians 10:4-6. What are you standing against? What are you standing against that has eternal consequences? To me, it's a challenge. One of the things that for me is that I hate broken relationships. I just hate them. I don't like being in the room around them. So I stand against anything that breaks relationships. Does that make sense? Actually, I think that the verse that said that God hates divorce isn't that God hates divorce. It's that God hates the consequences of divorce. He hates the broken relationship aspect of divorce. Because some people get all caught up in it, in the legal aspect of it. I don't think that's what he's saying at all. He just doesn't like the effect it has on relationships. So that matters to me. Don't get caught up in the divorce thing. And I'm not against anyone or judgmental about anyone who's had a divorce or any of that stuff. My youngest son did, and it's part of life. The reason God doesn't like it is because the effect on relationships, on the damage it causes to relationships, the outcome. We doing okay? What are you standing on? What are you standing for? What are you standing against? Now, this is probably, of all of these, this is probably the most important in my life. Who are you standing with? Some of you will take away from this and you will text somebody and say, I'm with you. There are people, you are stronger. There is definitely someone in every one of your lives who is weaker than you at this moment in time, who is having more of a challenge, more difficulties, and they need to know that somebody stronger than them is standing with them. I had a situation last year, the details don't matter, and I thought I had made a big mess, but I did it because I was standing for someone, and that person afterwards contacted me and said, No one has ever stood for me the way you stood for me in that situation. I'm not saying that to brag on myself. It's like I was willing to risk my reputation to stand with him and for him. There are people around you who need to know that you're standing with them. You're standing with them in a crisis, in a sickness, in a conflict, in a confrontation, in a time of weakness. Maybe they're going through something like a divorce and they need to know that somebody is standing with them and you can be that person. I don't know how many of you experience anything like this. I suspect more people than admit it because you don't always know it's happening. But if you wake up in the morning and you're thinking about somebody, I would encourage you, get in contact with them and saying, I was thinking about you this morning. About 9 times out of 10, that person in my situation will write back to me and said, how did you know? Like, well, I just woke up. I had half a dream about you. They usually say, then what was the dream about? I said, I can't remember the dream. I just know it was you. My friend Leif Hetland talks about leaning in. He says he leans into people. And I've experienced that. I've woken up, thought of somebody's name, leant into them, as it were, thought about them, sent them a text, contacted them. People need to know that there's somebody standing with them. And in this season, people feel so isolated. There are just some of the strongest people out there are feeling isolated. And some of those people, they're not in a position to say, I feel lonely, I feel alone. And yet your text, your contact. So who are you standing with? All right, sitting. Ephesians 2:6, we're seated in heavenly places. That's the only place to sit. You're sitting in heavenly places. This circumstance needs people who are sitting in heavenly places. Doesn't need people who are sitting in earthly places. Earthly places watching the news is not the place to sit. Heavenly places watching the news is much better. I want to encourage you, where are you sitting? We're sitting in heavenly places. We were made to sit in heavenly places. How are you viewing earth? Are you viewing it from heaven to earth? Definitely looks a lot better there. You feel stronger sitting in heavenly places, looking at the circumstances of this earth. So check where you're sitting. Are you sitting in your royal identity? Jesus in Luke chapter 4 sat down in that chair, a chair reserved for the Messiah as I understand it. He sat in his royal identity. If you sit in your royal identity, you will not be afraid of the future. You just won't. I mean, you've never heard William saying, I'm a bit worried about the mortgage on Windsor Castle. That's not a concern because he's sitting in his royal identity. And your royal identity is more secure than William's royal identity, which is quite a thought if you think about it. You're sitting in your royal identity and the confidence of who you are. Actually, the person that in the last couple of days, I also texted them a text and I said, you're not who man says you are, you're who he says you are. And I know who you are. And I know that you're a son. I know that you're a prince. I know that you're a miracle worker. I know who you are. It's just you've forgotten who you are because you got out of your chair. Get back in your chair. Get back in your royal throne. That's where you're meant to sit. Sit in that place. Or in the story of Mary and Martha. Mary was sitting at his feet. Sitting at his feet says, are you learning? Are you listening to him? Now, I'm more of a Martha than a Mary, I'll be honest. I understand. And I know there's a few who are similar to me in this room. The key to being a healthy Martha is go and sit at his feet before you do the stuff. It's okay to be a doer. That's why I wrote a book, Things Fathers Do. It's okay to do stuff. The first thing God did when he showed up is he did something. He created. So these people who tell me you're a human being first, like, no, I think you're a human doing and a human being. It's just you do things out of who you are. God did things out of who he is. There's nothing wrong in doing things. Just make sure that in your doing, you've sat at the feet of the one who gives the right instructions. And in this busyness of this season, there's something about that. I gave you a couple of examples, just the way that I'm seeing God speak. What I'm noticing is sometimes it doesn't take very long to sit at his feet and to get exactly what I need from him. This is not about time, it's about getting our mind right and about choosing and saying, I'm going to sit at your feet just for a moment. What are you saying? What are you speaking? And we need to be learners, lifelong learners who sit at his feet, which for many of us means that we pick up this book. We sit with this in our hands with a heart open just to receive and to learn from him. I was reading it yesterday morning and I was reading the story of Paul and I just looked at it and I thought, without any of the miracles, without any of the preaching, the journeys of Paul just on their own are epic. Like, unbelievable where that guy went, you know? Unbelievable. I was just reading it and thinking. And it sort of like shut my moaning up. You know, it's like, stop complaining. Look at what he did. So, we've got laying down in green pastures. Some of you need to learn to do that. Laying your stuff down. Laying your life down. What are you standing on? What are you standing for? What are you standing against? Those two are really important because it's confusing at the moment, you know? With the American election, it all feels like you're either Biden or Trump. It's like, that's a very narrow way of looking at things, quite honestly. Find something of eternal value to stand for and to stand against. Who are you standing with? I think really, really important. There's people in your life who need to know you're standing with them. Are you sitting in heaven's chair? Are you sitting in your royal identity? Are you sitting at his feet? And I give you a walking. Psalm 119, 105. Are you walking in the light? What light? What do you need light to shine on in your walk right now? Are you asking for light to shine on your walk? I think like many of us, and I'm in that weird position that I moved back from America and started an itinerant ministry and an online ministry in a pandemic. Interesting. So it causes me to be asking questions. What are you shining light on? That strategy word, that strategy verse suddenly became really important to me. Like I saw the light shining on that. It's like, okay, I got it. I know what you're putting light on. See, we should always be walking in the light. But what do you need the light to be shed on in your walk right now? What aspect of your walk do you need his light to shine on? Because he's a lamp and a light. He shines on our feet and he shines on the way that we're going. Where do you need the light right now? Where's the challenge in your walk? Whether it's with the walk with the Lord, your walk in relationships, your walk in your business. What do you need light to shine on? Ask him and he'll shine it. He'll shine it. He's incredible at that. He'll even shine lights on footnotes in the Bible, not just the verses. I know that because I was having a bad day about 3 months ago, I think. It wasn't a bad day. It was probably a bad hour in a day. It wasn't very long, to be perfectly honest. And I was just having a conversation with God, and it's like, okay, seems a little bit challenging right now. Seeing what, how's this working out? And I felt like the Lord said, read the verse that I sent you to Bethel with. And that was Genesis 12, verse 1. Leave the land of your fathers. Go to a place called Bethel, east of the mountains, near the giant trees. That is what it says in Genesis chapter 12. Honestly, those words are all there. Go to a place called Bethel, east of the mountains, near the giant trees. If you've been to Bethel Redding, it is Bethel, and it is east of the mountains, and there are big trees not very far away. The sequoias. So I just went, okay. And I grabbed Genesis in the Passion Translation. I've had it about a year. I open it, Genesis 12, verse 1. Leave the land of your fathers. It should say, it didn't. It says, go find yourself. The translation of that verse is go find yourself. And then I got caught up because in the footnote, it talks about a thing called lech lecher. And Lech Lecher, you know, even the modern day Jewish culture, they divide the Bible up, they divide the Torah up, and they pass it, I think it's called, P-A-R-S-E. And they divide it up into sections, and those sections they read on their Friday nights, give or take. I'm butchering the Jewish faith. But anyway, that's what they basically do. And there's one reading which is based on those verses, which is called Lech Lecher. And Lech Lecher is go find yourself. Lech Lecher is the redemptive journey of faith. And here's the truth. So I'm having a bit of a bad hour. I'm wondering why something is taking so long to work out. And he says, go and read Genesis chapter 12. I read Genesis chapter 12. It says, go find yourself. I discover this Lech Lecher piece in the footnotes. And this is the point it makes. If God walked in here now and said to David, here is the immediate answer to this situation right now, walk over there and pick it up. The only person that gets blessed is David, because it's so immediate, he's blessed. But in the wanderings of the redemptive journey of the Christian faith, other people get blessed by watching the way God works through your life. That's Lech Lecher. Abraham left the land of his fathers, and the first story you read after that is he hits a famine in Egypt. What's the point? It's the way he works. He wants more than you to be blessed in your walk with him. And sometimes the meanderings and the wanderings, even though it might at times feel like you're not getting to the place you want to go to as quick as you want, as long as he's shining light on every step of the journey, that's all you need. And that's the way he works. That's how his ways will be known in the whole earth. Because if you got everything that you were promised immediately, only you would be blessed. But in the wanderings and in the redemptive journey, the world sees how good he is and they learn his ways. I thought it was quite good anyway. Masks seem to keep congregations quiet, I've noticed. So are you walking in the light? And then the last one, I'm going to end with one other one because I think it's the best place to end. And I think there's a part 2 of this message about kneeling, which probably means you need to spend more money on the jeans you wear so you don't wear out if you do a lot of kneeling. But you get the point. The postures of the Christian life, you're either standing, sitting, or laying down. Because that's what you do in the natural life. So in the spiritual life, that's what you should be doing. So you should make sure that you're not wasting it. You should make sure that your laying is purposeful, your standing is purposeful, and your sitting is purposeful. So that you're not wasting what you're doing with your life. So running, write the vision. Habakkuk 2:2, write the vision, that he who reads it may run with it. If you write something down, who's the first person that reads what you wrote? You are. So that verse must be about you. Write the vision that when you read it, you'll run. You see, we should be running to something. Now, I know some people like running. I get it. They run for exercise. It's good. But actually, in the spiritual life, we should be running towards something. So have you written a vision that you're running to? Because otherwise you're wasting your running energy going somewhere that doesn't have a purpose to it. And honestly, I think in this season, we need much more purpose in our Christian lives. We need much more sense of vision in our Christian lives so that we're running to something. And lastly, and some of you will have heard this before, but Luke chapter 4, when I was coming back from America, I was preparing my last message that I would preach there, and I'd been there for 15 years, and so I wanted a 15-point message, just the way I'm wired. Don't judge me. I went to Stockholm for Awakening Europe in October of that year, 2016, and I stayed in room 1515. So God agreed with the 15 points for 15 years, okay? Because who stayed in room 1515? I mean, feels like an unusual number to me. So I knew that I needed a 15th point, but I didn't have one. I had 14 good points. And the message was called, Did You Get What You Came For? And I was on the plane, I was thinking about it, and I had this thought. And then I was reading Luke chapter 4, and I put two things together. You see, in America, if you get off a plane in New York and get a cab, the cab driver will tell you they're going to change the world. Because Americans have a dream. Americans have confidence. Now, I get it. Sometimes they step over into a little bit of arrogance. But actually, the beauty of America is that they have confidence. They have a dream. They are a confident people. Honestly, we're not always that confident. I mean, Rob was telling me about tall poppy syndrome in Essex. I mean, the Australians invented tall poppy syndrome, apparently, a nation that barely has a hero. Their words, not mine. So other people cut people down to size in Australia. But us Brits, we don't need any help from anyone else. We just cut ourselves down. So I was thinking about this, and then I read Luke chapter 4. And Luke chapter 4 says, and Jesus returned to Nazareth, where he was brought up and stood up. See, are you standing up? Are you standing up in confidence? We live in a continent. You live in Essex. You were talking earlier on about the good stuff about Essex. We live in a country that has exported the gospel, the preachers, the missionaries, the hymn writers. Many of us got more excited about our heroes in America, where they were talking more about Wigglesworth and Wesley and Whitefield than I was taught in church in this country. Because we haven't stood up where we were brought up. We haven't stood on the foundation that we've been given. See, are you going to stand up where you were brought up? Because that's, I believe, what we need to do. We've got to stand up with confidence where we were brought up. See, are you willing to stand up? To be confident? The Americans really do have this. They're confident. We tend to be a little bit too responsible, a little bit too afraid of appearing overconfident or arrogant or proud or something like that. And we miss the fact of who we are, and he's waiting for us to stand up. And that's what Jesus did. He returned to Nazareth, where he was brought up, where previously it had been like, he's just Joseph's boy. He was mocked and ridiculed. Or the place where Jesus said, well, I didn't do many miracles here. And a place actually that is misquoted most of the time, because people say, can any good thing come out of Nazareth? But actually, if you read that verse in context, the context is, can any good thing come out of Nazareth? Come, I'll show you. That's what the full version says. See, we need to stand up with confidence where we were brought up. And honestly, some of the problem with our world today, and some of the reasons why we have suffered so much from things like secularism, is because the church hasn't stood up with confidence in what we believe. And we have a moment right now to do that. That's why I was saying earlier about, why don't we take the lead? Why don't we become the change experts? Why don't we become the strategic experts? I don't know whether you've noticed this. This is a little rabbit trail, not too far of a rabbit trail. West Coast of America in the last 100 years has seen Azusa Street revival, has seen Amy Semple McPherson and the Foursquare movement, has seen the Jesus People movement, has seen John Wimber, has seen the healing movement that came out of Seattle, has seen, I'll include him in there, Bill Johnson and Bethel and one or two other places. Last 100 years, West Coast of America. That same West Coast of America has seen Boeing, Hewlett-Packard, Microsoft, Apple, Tesla, Nike, Facebook, Google, same patch of land, revival history, entrepreneurial history. I have a feeling that those two are meant to go together. I actually believe that there's something about the Spirit that enables them to happen, but they haven't married. I think there's an invitation. You can see the same thing on the East Coast of America, because the awakening was the birth of the Ivy League universities. That there's something that goes on when the spirit of revival hits an area. You can see it across Europe. You can see the relationships between Reformation and Renaissance and revival. You can see this. See, I think it's time for us to be out in front. It's time for us to stand up and believe that who we are, to stand up with confidence, Start asking God and say, give us the answer to this pandemic. How do we come out of this pandemic? Not just wait for the latest pundit or the latest kind of whoever, quack, to come out with some theory or some idea. Why can't we be at the forefront? That means that we have to stand up with confidence where we were brought up, because this continent is the birthplace of revivalists and missionaries and preachers and songwriters and hymn writers and creative geniuses. When we went to Prague in Czech Republic for Awakening Europe, I did the quickest study of creativity that had come out of the Czech Republic. Blood type, street lamps, pencils, screw type ship's propellers in a landlocked country, which came out of the season of creativity. God's waiting for believers that will stand up where they were brought up, stand on the foundations, stand on the history, stand on the Renaissance, the revival and the Reformation history, and stand up and say, do it again. Do it again. That Marconi thing, do it again. What's it look like today? What would that look like if you visited someone? Because I believe that there's a marriage between the entrepreneurial spirit and the revival spirit that is waiting to happen. So there's a million points. And Ephesians 6:13 says, having done all, stand. I have a feeling that's what we're meant to do. Because it's so easy to shrink back. It's so, I've got nervous once or twice recently, and then I've thought, stop it, People are asking me questions on various Zooms or whatever. What do you think's going on? And I've started saying, it's time to rebuild. It's time to stand on the foundations. It's time to do this. Like, who am I to say that? It's like, no, I know who I am. I know what he's told me. He told me read Zechariah chapter 4 on July the 29th last year. He didn't tell me for a joke. He told me, and I heard him, and I read it, and it applies today. And you have the same thing for your congregations, for your people. And it's time for us to stand up with confidence and not shrink back and not put ourselves down and not doubt. So, learn to lay down. Some of you need to do that. Just grab one of these. That's the only requirement. Take one home with you. You can do this at home. Take one home. Maybe some of you need to sort out your soul place, your soul thing, and your soul people, which might involve you buying a big green egg or a good coffee machine, or a camera, or none of those, because it might just be your favorite garden implement in your garden, doing your roses, which is great. I'm not mocking it. Just what is that place? What stuff or activities do you need to give up or lay down? When did you last lay your life down and say you can have it all? What are you standing on? What promise are you standing on? What are you standing for? Are you known for something? I had a reputation when I worked in Brixton Prison, the place I had the most reputation. I had a reputation that I would fight for justice for any prisoner. It was a reputation that the office staff knew that if I was going in and out of that office for a prisoner's file, that was an issue that I was fighting for. One of the funniest stories ever was that there was a man imprisoned from Gibraltar, and he had been extradited to serve a prison sentence for piracy on the high seas. So he'd been extradited from Gibraltar because he had been selling tobacco on the sea, which is illegal. And he served his prison sentence, and because we had got him extradited, he was responsible to find his own way home. I thought it was disgusting. And he didn't have a passport. How was he meant to find it? So we were going to kick him out of prison, and he was going to find his own way home. So I didn't accept it. So I campaigned for him, and I got him put on a plane with a letter signed by me, which is quite funny, really, and a photograph of him that I had taken. And I basically made a mock passport for him and got permission from Gibraltar because it was wrong. To me, it was just simple. It's like, this is wrong. I'm not going to let that happen. It's ridiculous. He would have ended up homeless. It's terrible. He sent me a really nice postcard, which to this day I have the postcard. It's just one of those funny things. It's not surprisingly a picture of a monkey from Gibraltar, but it was... what are you standing for? What are you standing against? Who are you standing with? Maybe all of you could do that tonight, is text someone and say, I'm with you. I'm for you. I believe in you. It's going to be okay. You're going to come through. You're going to make it. You're a champion. You're a son. You're a daughter. Who are you standing with? Are you standing up with confidence? Are you sitting in heaven's chair? Are you sitting in your royal identity? Do you take time to sit at his feet? Where do you need the light to shine on your walk? What's your vision that you're running to? And having done all, why don't you stand? And let me pray for you. You can stand. Who needs someone to text them and say, I'm standing with you? Who needs that? Anyone here? Are you all so good that you don't need anyone to say, I'm standing with you? I tell you, I need someone very often to say, I'm standing with you. They don't need to do anything. We got this false idea that we need to do something, and yet some people just need to know, well, Paul said he's standing with me. Your influence, your effect on somebody's life is incredible. Father, I ask right now that for every one of us, that you would speak through one of these points, whatever it is, and that we would develop a reputation for living life differently, for laying down in green pastures, for people knowing, oh, he gave that up. He laid that down, laid that stuff down. He beat that thing. He beat that addiction. He beat that habit. But we're known for people who've laid our lives down, who don't count the cost, who say, you can have it all. Every part of my life, you can have it all. So that we develop a reputation for what we're standing for. People will say, he's for that. He's standing for that. Or that we're standing against something. We're standing against injustice. We're standing against racism. That we're known for that. We have a reputation for that. And that nothing changes it. But we're known for confidence, for standing up. Some of you need that right now. You need to grab that confidence. Say, no, I'm going to be confident. I'm going to walk with boldness and with confidence. I'm going to return to where I was brought up. And I'm going to stand up. And I'm not going to put myself down. I'm not going to let anyone else put myself down. Some of us, you'll remind us of the promise that we're standing on. Maybe you said it when we were very young. Maybe you said it many years ago, or maybe you said it yesterday. The promise of God. You can stand on his promise. You can count on his promises. Maybe some of you need to remind yourself how to sit in heaven's chair. Or to sit in your royal identity. Give yourself a quick sozo and remind yourself, I'm a son, I'm a daughter. I don't need to worry about the future. I'm a son of a king. Maybe you just need to go, I think I need to sit at the feet of Jesus. Learn and listen. Spend long enough even to look at the time of day and wonder if it means something. Slow down long enough to see that which will change me. Where do you need the light on your walk? Some of you have this wrestle going on. I need to rest, but I also need to get some things done. How do I do that? Shine the light. Shine the light on that part of the walk. I'm trusting you for everything, but I know I need to co-labor with you, but I know I need to rest. How do I do it? Shine the light. Clarify our vision, that he who writes it may run. Run to the vision. Having done all, we're going to stand, Jesus. We're going to stand and we're going to believe that you're going to give us ideas, solutions, problems of this moment in time. This unique moment is a gift. And we accept the gift and we accept the invitation, and we don't like the discomfort and we don't like the inconvenience, and we're not celebrating that aspect of it, but we will be changed in this. And we will be changed to be like you. And we will be like those who dream when the Lord restores everything that was stolen because of this pandemic captivity. And we will stand and we will believe and we will trust you And we will say our God is faithful and he will use this for his good and his glory. And we say, speak to us, Lord. Speak to us. Give solutions. Give solutions to Wickford, to Basildon, to Chelmsford, and to Colchester, and to Romford, and to Dagenham. Give solutions through men and women of God, because we're standing ready to receive everything that you have for us. Father, I bless this group of people. I bless this house, this church, this family. Teach us how to stand, to lay down, to sit, to run, and to walk. Teach us how to be in a healthy posture in every moment of our days in Jesus' name.